Okay, so 2.4a is standard form. And if you recall, standard form looks like this. Ax plus by equals c. So you have this constant. That's our c, right? That's off by itself. Your x's and y's are together now on the same side of the equation. Okay, this is standard form. Just one thing to note to make sure that you're aware of is to simplify your life when there are fractions involved, you're going to do this, okay? You're going to look for a least common denominator, which is actually the bigger of the denominators that we will have. Well, not even the bigger necessarily. It might be the biggest one. It might be bigger than the biggest denominator you have. You need to multiply everything by that to get your fractions out of there, because when we're in standard form, we cannot have fractions, okay, or decimals for that matter. So I'm going to show you how to do that on a fraction problem and a decimal problem, and then you will do more of that in the homework as well. And then we're going to do a little bit of graphing, and then we're done. So this one's very short. Let me know if I go too fast or if you have questions here. So example 3. Why is that example 3? That should be example 1 and 2. I don't know why that's an example 3. It's a 1 and a 2. So writing these in standard form, okay? You're so used to right now, from what we did in the last lesson, moving everything so that the y is isolated. We don't want y isolated anymore. We want y and x together, but we also don't want fractions. So it's up to you what order you do it in. You may move the x first and then multiply to get the fraction out of there. That's fine. Or you may multiply to get the fraction out of there and then move things around. I'm going to multiply just because the quicker we get rid of fractions, I feel like the sooner people's minds get put at ease, because just a lot of people don't like fractions. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to look for a number that will get rid of my fraction. So I have 3/4. What could I multiply 3/4 by so that there is not a fraction there anymore? 4, not 4/4, okay? Because 4/4 would turn that into 12/16, which is just going to reduce to 3/4 again, right? So we can multiply by 4, but if we multiply by 4, we have to multiply by 4 on the other side as well so that we don't change the value of our equation. So what we're going to do is we're going to take all of this and multiply that by 4, and we're going to multiply the y by 4. So everything gets multiplied by that least common denominator, okay? In this case, we end up with 4y equals, what is 4 times 3/4? It's 3, right? The 4s are going to reduce to 1, so that's 3x. But then don't forget, you have to distribute the 4, so that's going to be minus what? 20. Minus 20, okay? Now here's the other thing. Right now, you could technically subtract 3x. Let me just show you what that would look like. Don't write this down yet. If I take away a 3x, I get negative 3x plus 4y equals negative 20. Technically, that's not wrong, but mathematically speaking, we like less negatives, or as few negatives as we can have in a situation, okay? So it's actually better if I move the 4y over to the other side and move the 20 to the other side so that we only have 1 negative instead of 2 negatives. I will take either one of those as an answer. I don't really care which one you give me. So either this is fine, but the more preferred way would be if we start here, 4y equals 3x minus 20, we would actually move the 4y over and then move the 20 over. So we'd end up with 20 equals 3x minus 4y, right? This goes away. This we can't combine, so you just write it as 3x minus 4y, and that would be your answer, okay? Like I said, this is the preferred answer. I mean, Yes. You can move the 20 to the end if you like, to the back end of it. 3x minus 4y equals 20. That's fine too. It's just, here's 2 negatives. This one only has 1 negative. It's more preferred to have less negatives. Okay? Any questions on that? Okay, so we're not going to solve this one, but what if I had this? Y equals negative 3/2 x plus 4. What would you multiply everything by? 2, right? What if I had y equals 1/5 x minus, what about this? What if I did that? What would you multiply everything by? 10, right? If you multiply everything by 10, this 5 is going away and the 10 is going away, okay? So just a heads up on those. Look for what your least common denominator would be. Okay, like we said, we don't want decimals, we don't want fractions. Here's decimals. Any thoughts on what we could do to get rid of the decimals? Sean?
Multiply by 10.
Yeah, so if we multiply everything by 10 here, remember that moves your decimal point over. It's going to get rid of our decimal point. So if it was y equals 9.1x plus 3.734, what would you multiply by then? Now 10 is only going to move it to here, right? We need to move it 2 more places than that. So it's a 1 with 3 zeros behind it. If you multiplied everything by 1,000, it would get your decimal points out of there, okay?
Could you put the decimal into a fraction, then find the biggest common denominator?
You could do that too, yep. Yep. Okay, so with this one, if we multiply everything by 10, multiply this by 10, multiply these by 10, we end up with 10y equals, this is 91x plus 36. Okay, so now, excuse me, no more decimals. How do I put that into standard form? How do I get my x's and y's together right now? Subtract 91x, right? So if I subtract 91x from both sides, I get 91x, negative 91x, plus 10y equals 36. Okay? Technically, if you subtracted 10y and subtracted 36, it's not wrong. You just have more negatives that way. So I would leave it like this, and that would be your answer. No more decimals. So just super important, you guys, you have integer coefficients. What's an integer? A negative or positive whole number, right? No decimals, no fractions.
Can you zoom out a little bit?
Yes.
Thank you. Oh, no, the other one. Thank you.
This one?
Yeah.
Any questions on those? Okay. Graphing. I love graphing with intercepts. I think this is the easiest way to graph. If we are trying to use intercepts to graph, we're saying where do we hit the x-axis and where do we hit the y-axis, okay? So think about that. If I were trying to find a y-intercept, you have an x value of what? Like this point right here. What's my x value? 0. X is 0 when it's a y-intercept, right? When you're trying to find an x-intercept, this point right here has a y value of 0. So what that means is, don't graph those because that's not the right answer. If I were to plug in a 0 for my x, I would be finding my y-intercept, right? If I were to plug in a 0 for my y, I'd be finding an x-intercept, okay? So that's what we do, but I don't need to see that work from you. This is all I need to see from you, okay? You're welcome to do that work if you want to do that work. We call it the cover-up method because if I plug in a 0 for 3x, I can just cover up that 3x because it equals 0, and I'm left with 5y equals 15. If I'm trying to find my x-intercept, I cover up the y, and I get 3x equals 15. So you just need to solve those two equations, and you get your intercepts. Does that make sense? Because our other value is 0, it goes away. So if we solve this, divide by 5, we get y equals 3. Divide by 3, we get x equals 5, okay? Those are your intercepts. Thank you, Rose. So that means when I go to plot this, this is my x-intercept. Where am I going to plot that 5? Up, down, left, or right? To the right. It's the x-intercept. This is your x-axis. This is your y-axis. So on the x-axis, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's my x-intercept, okay? This one is your y-intercept. Where am I going to plot that 3? Up, down, left, or right? Up 3. 1, 2, 3. Right there, okay? That's your y-intercept. Now all you have to do, draw your line in. This is your graph, okay? So if you use the cover-up method, cover up one, write that equation, solve. Cover up the second one, write that equation, solve. You'll get your intercepts, okay? You do B. Write your two equations that you would solve, plot those intercepts, draw your line in. Welcome back. What did you get for an x-intercept? X-intercept should be 4. Yeah, so your equation there is 2x equals 8, right? Because we're covering up the negative 4y for that. So divide by 2. And you get x equals 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's an x-intercept. What'd you get for your y-intercept? Negative 2. Negative 4y equals 8. Divide by negative 4. So y is negative 2, which puts you here. Okay, and then you would just draw that line in. Isn't that fun, Chris? It's a fun graph. You're what? I'm sorry. Okay, any questions on that? Okay, so if